Hi guys, today I'm going to read another story from the book 18 Days Underground, Incredible Rescue Stories by Joanne Mattern. This selection is called A Furry Friend. Amelia Milling loved to hike. The 21-year-old spent as much time as she could in the outdoors. Amelia was deaf, but she never let that get in the way of her sense of adventure or her love for the outdoors. Amelia was from Tennessee, but in June 2018, she was far from home. Instead of being in the warm South, Amelia was on vacation in Alaska. She was thrilled to be hiking and exploring the rugged mountains and forests, which were so different from her southern home. On that fateful June day, Amelia was hiking at Crow Pass Trail in Chugach State Park. The nearest city, Anchorage, was about 30 miles away. Earlier in the trip, Amelia had been with friends, but for this hike, she was alone. Amelia wasn't worried, however. She was an experienced hiker, and she had a tent and other gear with her. She was sure she was ready for anything. She wasn't. Amelia was about 4 miles into her hike when disaster struck. Her trekking poles, long wooden poles that helped her keep her balance on the rough path, suddenly snapped. Amelia's feet slipped out from under her. The next thing she knew, she was tumbling down the hill. The young woman fell about 300 feet down the mountain through the snow. Her helpless body slammed into a boulder, sending her hurtling through the air and down another 300 feet. I felt like I was flying, she later described her out-of-control fall. Finally, Amelia came to rest in the snow. Amazingly, she wasn't hurt, other than some bruises and scrapes, but she was lost and alone. Except she wasn't alone. A large white animal was running through the snow toward her. At first, Amelia thought it was a wolf, and her heart skipped a beat in fear. But as the animal came closer, Amelia saw it was a dog. The big white husky was wearing a collar and tag that read Crow Creek Guide Dog. Later, Amelia found out the dog's name was Nanook, and he belonged to a man who lived near the trail. The dog seemed eager to help, so Amelia decided to try hiking back to safety. Nanook led Amelia back to the trail, and the two hiked until it began to get dark. Then Amelia pitched her tent and crawled inside. She motioned for the dog to join her, but Nanook seemed happy to go to sleep just outside her tent. The next morning, Amelia expected Nanook to be gone, but when she crawled out of her tent, he was there waiting for her. When I opened up the tent, he was ready to go, Amelia marveled. I realized he really was sticking with me when he greeted me in the morning when I unzipped my tent. He had stayed the entire night next to me. The two continued their trek for hours. He gave me the motivation to get up and walk another 7 miles, Amelia later explained. If he didn't show up, I probably wouldn't have gotten back up and kept walking that much. After a half a day's hike, Amelia and Nanook reached Eagle River. The fast-moving river was fed by a glacier, and the water was icy cold. Nanook seemed sure of a good place to cross and swim across to the other side. Amelia took a few minutes to rearrange the items in her pack so they would stay dry. By the time she was ready, the water looked rougher and faster than it had before. Amelia couldn't summon up the courage to step into the raging water. Maybe there is a better place to cross, Amelia thought. She found another spot where the water looked calmer, but when she waded into the water, she lost her balance and fell into the rushing river. Within seconds, Amelia was soaked to the skin and freezing cold. That's when Nanook leaped into action. The dog bounded into the water and grabbed the strap of Amelia's backpack in his teeth. Nanook pulled and Amelia pushed, and she was finally able to get across to the riverbank. Amelia was dazed and so cold she was afraid she might be going into shock. She changed into dry clothes and snuggled into her sleeping bag. All she wanted was to warm up and go to sleep. Nanook had other ideas. The dog began licking her. The lick was not, "I want to play with you." Amelia later told her mother, "He just would not leave me alone." Amelia understood the dog wanted her to take action. The hiker realized that she might finally be close enough to civilization to summon help. Before she left on her Alaskan adventure, her mother had insisted she bring a device called a spot beacon, which uses a GPS and satellite technology to find a person's location. Amelia hit the SOS button on the device, sending a signal that she hoped would alert rescuers. After she pushed the button, Nanook seemed calmer. Amelia huddled in her sleeping bag with the dog lying close beside her. Amelia's signal reached the Alaska State Troopers. A few hours later, the thrum of a helicopter filled the air. Rescuers spotted Amelia in her bright red sleeping bag, Nanook still faithfully at her side. Once Amelia and Nanook were safely in the helicopter, she shared her story with the state troopers. Trooper Eric Olson was amazed to find out that Nanook had rescued Amelia and saved her life. He called the phone number of Nanook's tag and reached the owner, Scott Swift. Then, once Amelia was safe at the hospital, Olson drove Nanook back home. Scott Swift wasn't really surprised to find out his dog was a hero. It wasn't the first time Nanook had come to someone's rescue. About 2 years ago, there was one other girl, about 6 years old. He saved her when she fell in the river, Scott said. He explained that the dog is a free spirit who disappears for days at a time and often returns home with hikers or skiers who have befriended the dog on the trail. Still, Scott was amazed to hear of his dog's latest rescue. "It sends chills up my spine when I think about it. I certainly didn't train him to do anything like this," he told news reporters. "It's a pretty powerful feeling that this dog had this instinctual ability to want to go and help people." The Alaska State Troopers agreed. Soon after the event, they named Nanook an honorary state trooper. Trooper Olson said, "He's Alaskan's version of Lassie." As for Amelia Milling, she went back to her hiking trip after being checked out by doctors in an Anchorage hospital, and she made sure to spend some time with Nanook, her new best friend.